What's up everybody, this is Meher, and in this video we are going to learn about functions in JavaScript. In the previous video about values and expression, we learned about what values are, what expressions are, and how you can use bunch of values and put operators in between them to create new expressions. And not only that, we learned about value type, reference type, and a lot many other things. So if you have not checked that video out, I would highly recommend check it out because we are going to apply a lot of similar principles on our functions. So in JavaScript, your functions are values. And what I mean by that is your functions holds a lot of similarities with how your strings and numbers work. For example, you can store your function in a variable, you can pass it around, you can apply operations on top of them, just like you can do with your strings and numbers. So coming back to our first point where we talked about function being values, let's put it to work and see how it works. Okay, so let's begin by creating a really simple function in JavaScript, and this is an arrow function which when applied returns you back a value of 0. And to know if this function is a value or not, what we can simply do is we can give it to JavaScript like this. And if it's a value, JavaScript is going to give back the same function to us. And this is one of the things that we learned in a previous video about values and expression. For example, if you take a simple value like 52 and give it to JavaScript, it's going to give you back 52. But instead, now if you give 52 plus, let's say 42, you're not going to get 52 plus 42 exactly written like that, because JavaScript is going to evaluate this expression and give you back the value. And this is one of the ways you can know whether something is a value or whether something is an expression. And because your function is a value, you can use your function in a very similar way you would use your number 52. For example, you can create a variable like get 0, and you can say, okay, I want to hold my function over here, and then later on you can say get 0, let's invoke. So you get back value 0. So this very simple idea of using function as values lets you do a lot of exciting things in JavaScript. Like for example, you can do higher order functions, you can do function composition, and apply a lot of elements of functional programming in JavaScript. But these are some of the ideas that we are going to explore in our future videos. But in this video, now let's move on to the second part where we are going to look at the aspect of value type and reference type. Let me clear my console for now. And we know that, for example, the number 52 which we took, we could simply say, is this 52 equal to this 52? And you're going to get back the value true because 52 is of value type, but not is the case with an array, because if you take an array like this, although it contains the same thing, they are not going to be similar. So what kind of category does functions belong in? Are they of value type or of reference types? Because functions are values, right? So let's do a simple check. Let's create a function like this. Okay, let's wrap it in parentheses so that it does not create troubles. And let's create another function. So they both are exactly the same function, and we can see the output already that it is false. So that tells us that your functions are of reference type. So every time you create a new function, JavaScript is going to create a unique function that is not going to be similar to any of the functions that you have created. So you can never do equality check and get true for any of your functions, even though they look same. So now let's look at how we apply our functions. I know we already know it, but I'm going to connect it to a different idea, and that's why I'm going to talk about how we apply it. So the way we apply our functions is by basically putting a parenthesis in front of our function, and you can pass 0 or more arguments to it, and your function is gonna run the statements in it, or it's going to return a particular value. So in our case, we are not going to pass any parameters because we are going to keep it really simple. So now when we apply this function, what we get back is a value 0. The result was pretty expected over here. We knew that it's going to return 0, but what's interesting here is that 0 is a value and your values are also expressions. So that brings us to the fourth point of this video, which is that you can put even expressions on the right side of an arrow. So just taking a step back, for example, your value 23 is also an expression, and your 23 plus 100 is also an expression. So can we safely say that we can even put expressions on the right side of the arrow? And the answer is yes, you can. Okay, so let's take this idea even more further. we have seen that this is one of the expressions that we have, and there's another expression on the screen right now, and that expression is right here. Because this expression returns you back a value of 0. So can we safely say that we can even put a function instead of 23 plus 100, which is right on the right side of the arrow? Okay, so let's do this. Let's create a new arrow function, and instead of putting a simple thing like 23 plus 100, we are going to put the first expression, which is this one. So we are going to do this. We are going to take this and put it right here. So I think maybe let me just copy this right here and paste it. So this bit is actually a replacement for this expression which we had earlier, and we have put a new expression right here. So let me just keep it a little tighter, and let me close the parenthesis for this, and let me put the invocation. And what we see here is that you get a value 0 back. So now let's look at the fourth part, where we're going to see that you can even put a block on the right side of the arrow. And what that is pretty simple, which is this. And when you invoke this function, what you get back is undefined. So in JavaScript, your undefined actually represents your absence of value, and undefined probably demands like another video altogether. But to give you in a very small gist, your undefined is of a value type. That means all the undefined which are in JavaScript are actually same. What I mean by that is, for example, if I take an undefined and I put it under this kind of an identity check, you're going to get back true. And same will be the case with, for example, if I do like this, and let me just take the same function which we had here, because that function also returns undefined, you're going to get to see that it returns true. So that means it's of a value type. And that's about it for undefined, because undefined is a separate topic altogether. So now let's talk about blocks. So what is a block in JavaScript? Your block in JavaScript contains number of statements, and your expression is also one of statements. So can we say that we can put expressions like this inside the block and invoke our function? And you can see that you're allowed to do that. And not only that, you can even go ahead and create multiple expression, but the idea is that you keep them separated by semicolon. So I can go ahead and write another expression like this, and although I'm passing statements inside my block, and there are two statements that I have, and there's a block and the function is getting invoked, I'm still getting undefined. And it's because to get a value out of your block, you need to use this one statement called as return statement that terminates your function and gets you the value back. So in this example, now if I keep it simple and just keep one expression or statement, I can say return 1 plus 1, and I'm going to get now the value 2 back. Okay, so for the last part of the video, let's look at the first part which we discussed in this video, that your function is a value. And also we know that something like this is also a value. And we also looked at this one part where we put an expression on the right side of the arrow. And you must be thinking right now, why didn't we put a value on the right side of the arrow, which is also this part? So let's try that out. So what we can do here right now is create an arrow function, and now we can put a function here instead of a value, because your function itself is a value. So what we have here right now is a function which, when applied, returns us a function which again, when applied, returns us back the value 0. And how we can do that is by simply wrapping this whole thing in a parenthesis and invoking it once, and we can see that it invokes or gets back the function which was within this, because of course this is a value and you got back your value here. And this function we can apply again. So instead of applying this whole block or this whole expression once, we can apply it twice, and what you get back is 0. So this form of function which returns a function is one of the most interesting ways you can put your functions to work, and we are going to see that in our future videos, how we can use this structure to create some interesting patterns. So this is it about basics of function in JavaScript, and if you like the content then please do like and subscribe and leave me a feedback. Let me know what you would want me to cover next.